You want to hear it with vocals? Go sing it.
When I was a kid trying to figure out how to make heavy records, there were no online courses, no Nail the Mix. I was way too young to go to some recording college. I mean, I was like 13. So I had to get creative. And this right here was my entire education. This was my only window into the world of making huge metal records. I watched this over and over and over again until the VHS tape broke. I remember being blown away by stuff like this. But that was the early 90s, and we're in a totally different world now. We have technology that people couldn't even dream of back then. DAWs, endless plugins, amp modelers that are great. I, for one, could not even imagine doing things like this nowadays.
Basically, Randy Razorblade, a brilliant engineer, he would then basically sit and like cut the tape together. You know, that way you find the bits that have the most spunk and the most vibe and the most attitude to it.
We have about 250 fills for this song.
So that brings up a question. Is there anything in this old documentary that's still useful? Is there anything relevant to a producer nowadays? Or is this just a nostalgia trip? Today we're going to find out. I'm going to watch 1.5 years in the life of Metallica Part 1, and we're going to see if it still holds up. Let's get into it. You know, I'm not normally a fan of clean bass tones in metal, but that's a good one. A little bit of context for those of you who aren't as old as me. Metallica was already a huge band when the Black Album was being made, which that is what this movie is. But they were already huge. However, the Black Album is what propelled them to the Metallica that we know today, which is like mega band. But they were already at the top of the heap for metal, as you can see by this elaborate, well-shot, well-planned out intro.
It's just me. Sad but true. Go life. Through the never. Everything else and go on.
Listen to the words.
So back in the old days, they would release records at midnight on release day. I believe it was on Tuesdays. And people would line up around the block for that. Like, it really mattered. Now, Metallica Black Album was kind of before my time. But I remember doing that for Slipknot, Iowa. It was super exciting. And think about it kind of like Black Friday, where people line up. Black Friday without the stampedes. But it was definitely a thing. I've spoken a lot about how I like the new music industry, but this is one of those relics of the past that unfortunately ain't coming back, and it is kind of sad. So I want to point out a few things. I don't know if this is pre-pro or drum tracking, or maybe pre-pro and drum tracking at the same time, but notice how fucking badass they sound just sitting together in a room playing. Like, they are getting to work. And I know that people like to talk shit about Lars a lot, especially nowadays, but at his prime, he was a pretty great drummer. Not as far as technicality goes, but just listen to how well phrased his parts are, and listen to how good he feels playing these parts, and check out how hard he's hitting. And also just pay attention to how everybody just sounds awesome. James is great.
To include everyone.
They all sound great, both collectively and as individuals. It was kind of hard to fuck with Metallica in their prime.
Well, the songs we had were quite a bit more simple, a little more to the point. We realized that we needed a little more thickness in the sound, a little more muscle.
If you notice, James comes in with a vision. Lars, too. They had a vision. They wanted the songs to be more to the point with a little bit more muscle. And that's called having vision. And for a producer, that's a dream. It's a dream to get a band that knows exactly what they want. And they hired Bob Rock, the producer, specifically for their vision. You want to work with bands that have a vision, and obviously Metallica had a vision.
The recording studio we recorded this album at was in North Hollywood, called 1-on-1. And we went in, October, and we didn't walk out of that place till sometime in May or June. I don't know, it's kind of blurry now.
That is absolutely crazy. That's also one of those things from another era that just doesn't happen. Imagine spending 9 or 10 months with a studio on lockout. That's just, I can't imagine it. Nowadays, if you spend 3 months on a record, that is a long time. And so, most professional metal records now are made in 3 to 6 weeks. So like this 9 or 10 months business, it's extreme.
I think we kind of all fessed up to the fact that we just needed to bring somebody else into our tightly knit organization and work with us in the studio. And the only name that actually ever came up was this guy named Bob Rock. So me and James flew up to Vancouver, hung out with him for a couple days, and it was like the vibe was there right away.
This is really, 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 really important that an artist knows when it's time to bring in somebody else. Like, we've all heard horror stories about just people with big egos who don't know their own limitations. And one thing that you can't say about Metallica is that they don't know when to bring in other people. I mean, obviously there's some huge egos in that band, and who wouldn't have a big ego having done what they've done? And also, you kind of need a big ego to have the courage to put yourself out there like that and to persevere through everything. But at the same time, it can't be so big that you think you're perfect and that you don't need help. And when you want to level up, you got to know when it's time to bring in a collaborator or a teammate. And so I think Metallica identified, we have hit a really good place, but we want to keep going, and we need to bring in this Bob Rock character to level things up. Wise choice, obviously. It worked.
Not that he'd really say a whole lot of words or anything, but the guy would say something, and he'd kind of like, he could like burn a hole with his eyes. It's like, what are you talking about? It's my music, And eventually, we try the idea, and a lot of the time it will work because Bob has amazing musical vision, and foresight is really cool.
That's kind of key. What Newstead was saying about James reacting to Bob Rock and not liking somebody messing with his songs. If you've been in a band or you've worked with bands, we've all either been that person or come across that person who doesn't like their songs messed with. It's a very natural reaction, especially if you're the main writer. And clearly James did not like having his songs messed with. There's different types of producers. In metal, I don't really know what it's like in pop, but in metal, you have like the engineer type producer who all they do is make the band sound as awesome as they possibly can and coach them on performance. And then you have the type of producer who basically does everything for the band. I mean, the band still plays, but the band is kind of like a vessel for the producer's vision. And then you have a situation like this, which is probably the best version, at least for this situation, where the producer is like an extra band member, where they have their own songs and they're coming in looking to level up, and they're looking to the producer to help them with that. But in order for the producer to be able to help them with that, they need to be able to put their ego aside and take his suggestions. And sometimes that's hard to do, especially if you've never done it before. But that's actually the mark of a really great producer, is if you can convince an artist to do that. Actually, the third URM podcast episode ever from 10 years ago was called Musical Translator. And that's exactly what this is about. You have to be able to translate the artist's vision into what's coming out from the speakers, while understanding that the artist might not speak the same technical engineering language as you. So you have to understand that vision and translate it into reality, and little by little gain their trust to where they're not seeing red every single time that you have an idea. But kudos to James for being open-minded enough to take the ideas of Bob Rock. And like I said before, sure as hell paid off.
As far as the drum tracks, Lars likes to work at night, sleep all day, and I'm pretty much the opposite.
Yeah, I'd rather sleep all day too.
We'd say, okay, we'll come in at 3 in the afternoon, and I'd be there.
I understand they paint white lines on the fucking road, so they say you can't drive there, but they don't actually put anything there to prevent you.
You say you're starting in a certain time, and that time for some people is the time. The time is the time. After the time is not the time. Before the time is not the time. The time is the time. But for some people, time is relative. They exist on a different clock than the rest of us. And, you say 2 o'clock and they show up at 7 p.m. And then when they get there, then they need to like hang out and get in the mood. And it's like 9 p.m. or 10 p.m. before you start tracking. And it can be super, super frustrating. Now, the difference between a Metallica session in 1991 and most other sessions is when there's millions of dollars and an almost endless amount of time and the stakes are so huge, you can give leeway to some people for this. But on most metal records where, the end date is coming up in like 3 weeks and there's very little budget, this kind of stuff cannot be tolerated. So while, it's kind of funny, and obviously they did tolerate it in this scenario, they tolerated it because of the situation that they were in. That would not fly on a smaller budget.
Driving on like fucking nails. Okay.
And by the way, you can tell that they're still really frustrated about it. They're just making humor of the situation rather than throwing hissy fits. Just a reminder that when they get to work, they get to work.
I'm very like vibe oriented, and like this time around I just wanted to get more of a kind of a swinging, kind of just rhythmic, kind of some shit going on back on the drums.
What does that mean? I'm kind of vibe oriented. I want to get some shit like some swinging back on the drums. So that could mean any number of things. And like I was saying before with the musical translator idea, you have to know what people mean. That could be interpreted a bunch of different ways. Does he mean he wants to do a Metallica swing record? I don't think so. I think what it meant is that it needed to have more of a groove to it and needed to make you bob your head and kind of just be more epic and have more, I guess, swagger, as opposed to being super tight, super technical, like And Justice for All. That's my interpretation. And Bob Rock's job as a producer is to sit there in conversations with someone like Lars, who isn't going to give him technical terms and understand what he meant by all that.
You want to hear it with vocals? Go sing it. No, my throat is really fucked up right now. Okay, buddy, pal. I wouldn't ask you to do a drum roll if your arm fell off.
I'm sorry I laughed.
The vocal line goes exactly with the guitar.
Just one verse and one chorus.
This is a great band fight.
You can't play the song without me or what?
Is that like...
No, it isn't, but I think James made himself quite clear. I don't give a fuck. Sure, let's do it. James, fucking blow your voice out, man.
Oh, man.
And then Lars won't have a vocalist at all tomorrow to fucking cut his track.
Well, let's do the whole song, just the verse and the chorus. If you ever need a drum or anything to figure out...
If I ever need a drummer...
If you ever need a drum roll to figure out a vocal line, call me anytime.
That'll happen.
All right, so this is right there another example of Bob Rock being a great producer. Not only do you have to be a musical translator, but you also kind of have to be a mediator between people butting heads. And right here, James and Lars are butting heads, and they're both kind of right. I mean, they both have reasonable requests. So how do you figure out a win-win for the two leaders of the band who are digging in their heels, and they're both kind of right? James says, I'm not feeling well. My throat is kind of fucked. I don't want to sing. And Lars is saying, dude, it's just a verse and a chorus. That's all I'm asking. So that I'm trying to finalize my parts for this song that we're recording for our album. Can you just give me, you don't have to sing your ass off. Can you just give me a verse and a chorus? James does not want to give him a verse and a chorus. And as you saw, he got up and kicked something and wanted to leave. And that's when Bob Rock interjected with some humor and started making light of the situation. And eventually they got back to work. And that's definitely one of the most important jobs of a producer, because bands are going to fight. I mean, bands break up in the studio all of the time. It's a potentially very explosive situation. So kudos to Bob Rock for quelling that before it led to something worse. You can hear James is straining, so eventually he agreed. You can reason with the guy.
Everyone had to put up with the drum tracks, which are always really fun. So I wasn't the only one in living hell.
Drums can take a long time. I remember when I first moved to Florida, Trivium used my drum room with Colin Richardson producing their album. I think they spent 5 days just finding exactly where they wanted the kick drum to be. It took 3 weeks, I think, to record the drums. They sound great, sound amazing, but drums can take a long time. And nowadays, bands don't always play together in the studio. But if you are doing something, production where everyone's playing together in the studio, you can see how some bands would start to go stir crazy.
We're going to take like 25 minutes here and change the snare head and do another set.
Pro tip, always have more snare heads than you think you're going to need. And also, did I see an SM7B on the hi-hat? I think I did. Yeah, there's an SM7B on the hi-hat. I like that. Good choice. Good choice, Bob Rock. I approve.
I can really hear that like 15-minute fucking guitar solo wailing right there at the end.
God, I'm so glad metal bands don't really do that on stage anymore, is the 15-minute guitar solo jam. Oof. Yeah, that's a thing I'm glad doesn't exist. Or at least I haven't seen it for a while.
You can tell the vibe.
The vibe is quite serious.
Yeah.
Big song on the record just for the vibe.
They're also stoked to be done with drums, except for Lars. But, yeah, definitely a relief.
We wanted to concentrate a little more on the vocals.
Hey, is this on?
Never really took the time to do that with any of the vocal stuff.
And that's probably why this album got so huge, is because they put more focus into the vocals. I mean, like it or not, vocals are the thing that will make or break a band. It's just not a coincidence when a metal band decides to get super serious about the vocals, put the time that's needed into it, that they do better. How many of you have done a metal record where you spend a week on drums, a week on rhythm guitars, a day or two on bass, a few days on leads, and then do all the vocals in a day? Or you've spent like a month total on the record and 2 days on vocals? That has happened to me so many times. And it's bad. It's not good. It's not good because the vocalist gets tired. You don't have time to refine the parts. If the vocalist is not at their best and you save the vocal tracking till the very end, well, you're just kind of fucked. Or you need to delay the tracking, which delays the mix, which could blow the deadline. And you want to have as long as possible to really get the best vocal lines possible, to really, really craft that. Because again, your vocals are what's going to connect with the audience. So they say success leaves clues. I've heard that a lot from like self-help gurus or whatever, but watching this, they were setting themselves up to make a huge record, going in with the vision of wanting a more muscular sound, more direct to the point, of like really putting in the time with the vocals, of choosing the right producer. You know, these decisions add up.
Or vocal-wise, we tried a couple different things that I hadn't done before. I would do basically what Lars was doing with the drums. It was a master track. If a word was wrong or out of key, we'd punch in that word or whatever, which was a lot easier.
So what he's saying is that instead of going line by line, they'd get one master track, which is probably, I'm guessing, because they didn't show it, but I'm guessing is a performance all the way through, and then go back and just fix certain words. I think that's what he means.
Let me go from the top. Let's do this first verse.
Say your prayers, little one. Don't forget my son to include everyone.
Notice he already sounds great, just like that. He sounds like himself. I don't know what else to say, but he already sounds like the James you know and love, just like that. Just belting out a track, which is how it should be.
Keeping one eye open.
Same delivery.
Sleep with one eye open.
Cool, let's do it.
That's a skill that a producer should have, which is even if they're not the best singer, they should be able to sing well enough to be able to communicate parts, and also know an instrument or two well enough to be able to communicate parts to the vocalist, so that when they're making suggestions to the vocalist isn't then trying to become a musical translator for the producer.
For guitars, to kind of keep the close crunch, the tightness, we had to build this kind of a tent thing, which is basically some foam walls and some U-Haul blankets and, all that.
That still works. I mean, look, if you have a recording environment that's not ideal, you can really help yourself out by building some makeshift baffles with like moving blankets or whatever it is to just dampen the room around you. And basically, you're taking the room out of the equation. You know, when tracking guitars, that's huge, especially for this genre, because you really don't want rooms seeping into that direct sound. And as nice as this studio is, they still need to physically alter the space to a degree to get it ideal. And if, like, say you just have like a garage or living room or basement or whatever, and it's not really conducive to this sort of thing, figure out ways to deaden the room. You know, you can build your way with very little money. You can build your way out of a bad sounding room by basically eliminating the room.
Okay.
God, that sounds great. Also, I want to point something else out. You see this police line? This is something that if you've only worked with amp sims, you're not going to understand what this is. But this right here is why working with real amps and cabs can be a pain in the ass sometimes. This right here is to keep people away from knocking the mics. Because if you move the mic even a centimeter on a guitar cab, you're going to change the tone completely. This was something with records that have mic'd up cabs where, especially if there's a lot of people walking around, walking in and out, there's alcohol involved, which there is in this situation, shit can get knocked over, and then there goes your guitar sound. You're not getting it back. You don't get that with amp sims and IRs. Man, James just sounds great, doesn't he? All right, so I guess this would be the Studio B, where they're working on other things. And this is something that you don't need a huge studio for. I've been to lots of studios where there's an A room, a B room, and maybe even a C room. You know, someone will be editing drums in one room while somebody will be maybe tracking their own guitars in another, while somebody is like doing vocals in another, but kind of like, I call it the metal factory. And that's what they've got going on here. God, that sounds great. I want to hear that again. Holy shit. Okay, so, you know, when they say tone is in the hands, you give that to any other player and it wouldn't sound like that. And I know it's mic'd perfectly, great amp sound, great cabs, great everything. But the reason it's so sick is because that's James playing it the way that he plays it.
Trying to make some basic notes and trying to, you know, just get an idea of where the best performance is and where the best shit is from the takes.
Okay, so what they're doing in the other room, I guess they're editing drums. They didn't have Pro Tools and they couldn't go through playlists, so they're listening to all the tapes of all the tracks, and they've got a checklist, which is basically like verse 1. On the columns and on the rows, it would be like take 1, take 2, take 3, take 4, I think. And then making notes like, check, this is good, X, don't use this. And then they're going to splice it together manually.
Basically, Randy Razorblade, a brilliant engineer.
That's Randy Staub, that he called Randy Razorblade. Those of you who love the way Nickelback records sound, as Randy Staub, before Chris Basford became the Nickelback dude, like the classic Nickelback stuff that sounds just insane.
Basically, Randy Razorblade, a brilliant engineer. He would then basically sit and like cut the tape together. You know, that way you find the bits that have the most spunk and the most vibe and the most attitude to it. We have about 250 fills for this song.
So if you think that editing drums can be annoying on a DAW, imagine having to physically cut tape together. Well, that's what they did.
Bob and Randy couldn't hear the actual noise that was coming out of the speakers. The pick sound on the bass was interfering with what they were hearing coming out of the speakers. So they had to put a wall of foam in front of me so that they didn't hear the pick sound and they only heard the bass sound out of the speakers out in front.
That wall right there, a foam that they built so that the pick sound didn't distract them. Guitar players that play in the bedroom, I've heard a lot of people say, I sound so percussive and tight when I'm tracking, and then when I listen back, it just sounds like different, like non-distinct. And my answer is always, I think you're hearing the sound of the pick in the room, because if you are hearing the sound of the pick in the room, along with what's coming out of the speakers, it's going to sound more percussive. You're going to hear the pick sound. It's going to sound like you're playing tighter.
A rhythm section, an actual rhythm section, like it's supposed to be, like everybody else has known about for a long time, but we're just now realizing it or something.
Lots of metal bands still don't know what a good rhythm section is, but makes a difference. His feel is so good. A lot of times with metal, you get guitar players playing bass, and that works. But when you have a real bass player who plays really hard and has great feel, you can't replace that. Still a shame that he was so quiet in Injustice for All.
It's ignoring the dynamics of the song. That's what I'm saying. Even your toms don't come thundering like, you know, they're coming in like kind of, they got lots of feel.
Communication is key. You know, on the Riff Hard podcast, I have had over 100 different guitar players from different bands, all of them successful. And what I've noticed from talking to them, and also from touring and knowing bands in the studio, the ones that do the best over the long haul are the ones who can communicate even when they don't like to. And right here, have you heard James said, "I don't like it," about the part that they were talking about. Lots of people are afraid to just say, "I don't like it," to a part, opposed to just saying, "I don't like it," and then you sit there and you guys communicate it and figure it out, then you're done. It didn't have to be a fight. You worked it out like professional adults. That's how it's done.
It got fun, actually, for a little while in the studio, experimenting with things. We tried a bunch of different shit, you know. Certain amps, like old thing that the Supro that Jimmy Page was using and shit. Some 12-string stuff, you know, sitar thing on Wherever I May Roam. That's just the cool thing about guitar. You can kind of get a little wild with it.
12 strings are really, really cool. Part of what makes this album sound great is that when it does have clean parts that aren't just the metal, they don't just sound like every other album you've ever heard. And it's because they took the time to layer things properly and to try things. You might not have 9 or 10 months in the studio, but you do have a DAW, and you are able to experiment these days.
Fucking wow.
That smile, you know it when you come up with a part, or an artist you're recording comes up with a part that's just perfect. Like, all you can do is laugh or smile, because it's like, that's just great. It sounds like it was always there. Like, why didn't I write that? That's such an obvious part. That reaction is a very honest reaction to a great little detail. Electric guitars are so cool. I played one of those at Jens Bogren's place. Looks like this is a different studio. I think this is probably Bob Rock's place in Canada. Look at James's face while he's listening to those keyboards. I know that there's some people who hate keyboards in metal. I don't know if James is one of those people, but that face, I mean, you tell me.
Kind of sounds like Emerson, Lake and Palmer, doesn't it, right there?
Looks like Lars isn't too stoked either.
You happy we're in the digital age, huh?
It's great. I can't wait till I have to play drums every album.
That's the next album.
Lars has always been ahead of his time with understanding things. He's gotten shit for it. We all know Napster. Notice he just said, "I can't wait till I don't have to play drums anymore," in reference to Bob Rock saying, "Aren't you glad we're in the digital age?" This was in 1991. I'm sure he didn't know Superior Drummer was going to come out like 20 years later. Less than 20 years, but still. What you saw there is they're trying out a bunch of different amps and cabs and mics, as well as a bunch of different guitars for the solos, trying to find the exact right combination of each for each solo, which is something that people do when there's a lot of time. And it is, you know, honestly, it's a really good thing to do, because odds are that using the same instrument for every part isn't the best choice. It's just not the best choice.
Okay, well, let's go back to your regular sound then. because I want to do the solo. I don't want to fuck around with sounds. I'll put it through an amp later.
All of you purists who think that reamping is a new thing, what did Bob Rock just say? I don't want to hear about this reamping ruined music shit that all you purists and old timers say. Reamping has been around since the 70s, maybe earlier, but the earliest I know about is the 70s. And what did Bob Rock just say? Listen to it again.
I'll put it through an amp later.
I'll put it through an amp later. And what is that? That's reamping. So one of the greatest, if not the greatest, metal record of all time, at least sound-wise, had reamping on it. It's not just kids these days ruining music with reamping.
Spinal Tap.
The answer is none more black.
I love Black on Black.
Okay, here's the deadline. We got this much space left to do vocals. And it's like, go, you know?
I thought they had been working on vocals the whole time. Maybe what they were doing was pre-pro, because James just said that they had all that time for everything else. And then with vocals, it was just go, which tells me that even on the Black album, they had treated it like every other metal record. But they have been working on vocals the whole time. So I guarantee you that some of what they already tracked was going to be kept because they tracked it properly. If you're smart, when you're doing pre-pro, you track it for real, because oftentimes the pre-pro will be better than the actual tracking. So don't fuck around in pre-pro. That's the moral of the story here.
Told you to not fuck around.
And make sure that first ga is up, okay?
On the drums? On the snare?
No, on the guitar.
Oh, on
Ga
the guitar.
ga. Okay, and a little more kick. There you go. Okay.
So before there was actual automation, these mixes had to be basically performed at the mixer. I don't know, but I'm guessing there's no automation on that board. And so Bob Rock telling Randy Staub he wants more kick on that entrance means that next time they do a pass through the song on the fader, the kick is going to be turned up a little bit right there manually. It's a performance with old school mixing.
I'll let you guys duke it out on this one, because frankly, I don't give a fuck. I'm tired of arguing.
No, you're not.
Yes, I am.
No, you're not.
You're not trying to argue.
I'm sick and fucking tired of arguing.
You got to hold your ground. If you really, really do believe that something in a mix has to be a certain way, and you're sure of it, you got to hold your ground. But it's also important to know when other people are right. And that's one of the hardest parts of mixing. Also, as a mixer, you know, you're in the service business. You're doing somebody else's record. And so even if you disagree with a call, you have to know, when is it good for me to speak up and say, hey, you're going to make the record worse? Let's please not do this. Or just go along with it, even if you disagree with it. And as an artist, at what point do you say, I trust this person or I trust these people, so I'm going to go along, versus, no, everybody's wrong. We got to do it this way. It's different every time, but it's definitely something that comes up a lot that you just got to learn to deal with.
That's it though. Everybody sits around going, I think the drums should be a little bit louder. I think the guitar should be a little bit louder. Oh, that lead's not loud enough. Oh, time for me to solo now.
What Jason is saying is why it's good to have one central person be there for the mix, and that person is kind of like the communicator for the rest of the band. Usually when you have every single band member involved or hitting up the mixer separately, you can have a lot of conflicting notes. Like, say you have one band member texting for louder bass, another band member texting for quieter bass. It can get very, very disorganized. And if the whole band is actually attending the mix, it can also get very chaotic because people just throwing out ideas and opinions constantly. So, I mean, everybody's different, but I know that a lot of mixers prefer to work with one chosen person from the band that the whole band agrees is the person, and then that person gives the mixes to their band members, collects everybody's notes, comes to an agreement, and then passes that on to the mixer. Now, I'm not saying it always has to work that way. That's just one efficient way to do it.
Mastering of a record is the process where after you've mixed down on like a digital master, you then make production masters, and they cut the lacquers that they print the CDs and make records from and stuff like that. And it's a pretty cool process.
Sterling Sound, that's a legendary place in New York. My band Doth, we had our album The Hinderers mastered there by Ted Jensen in 2005. It was awesome. I actually got to go and watch him work. It's actually not normal to have artists attend these types of mastering sessions, but it was awesome to get to experience that.
The Metallica came to Madison Square Garden, but not to perform. Instead, they gave away 19,000 free tickets for fans to come here and listen to their new album.
An album release show where they gave out 19,000 tickets at Madison Square Garden. Think about what a different world that was. Holy shit.
The album was far and above my expectations from the first time I heard James and Lars' demos. It was a feeling of accomplishment, a very big feeling of accomplishment, and a good boost for my pride personally as well.
So there you have it. That was my first time watching that in like 25 years. And the question is it still relevant? You know, a lot of it is like a museum piece, like the multi-million-dollar budget, 9 months in the studio, writing the entire album in the studio pretty much, like all that stuff. That's product of another era. That's not how 99.9% of us make records anymore, and in my opinion, that's a good thing. But the real lessons in here, the stuff that matters, that is timeless. The pressure, the arguments, the struggles to nail a take, the endless discussions about if a part is good enough, that's the stuff that technology will never change. It's about decisions, the creative friction, and the relentless drive to get it right. And that's what we focus on at URM. If you want to see how the best in the business get it done today, with modern tools and real-world budgets, you need to check out Nail the Mix. It's the closest you can get to being in the room without having to deal with a camera crew. The link is in the description. So what did you think? What's your biggest takeaway from watching this? Let me know in the comments. And make sure you like and subscribe because we're putting out a new video every week. See you next time.